So today's video is designed under a specific idea of providing basically the best tech that I've used that represents a good bang for its buck, like a really good value proposition for the things that it's capable of doing. It also has a theme of being minimum components with the maximum results. Another thing to consider here is that a lot of these products are previous generation products, and so you can get them even cheaper on the used or renewed market. I am not afraid at all of previous gen products. A lot of times the next generation is really not worth it. A great example is phones and headphones and keyboards, stuff like that. Sometimes sticking with the old stuff is the best and most cost-effective way to go. So I want to start with this monitor. This monitor has been probably the best desk-related purchase that I've personally made, mostly because of how productive I've been able to be with it because of the massive screen real estate. This is an LG CX 48-inch version. Now, if you're familiar with the name CX, you'll probably know that they don't actually sell these anymore. So your options are used or to go to the newer generation model, which is very similar to this, very similar specifications with a couple upgrades, and cheaper than what I bought this for new, which is the LG C2 48-inch version. There's a whole breakdown of specs, like it's a 4K OLED 120 Hertz display. It's fairly color accurate right out of the box. It's got these incredibly slim bezels. The image quality is spectacular. It's got a lot of good benefits to it. But honestly, to me, the thing that I've enjoyed most about this is a combination of its work capability and its play capability. So media consumption like movies, TV shows is awesome if you are kind of a desk user. It's also incredible for games with that 4K 120 Hertz. I noticed a lot of games you can bump down to 1440 to bump up the frame rate a little bit, and that seems to be a perfect mix of visual fidelity and frame rate speed, but you still get this massive display. It's just so like engaging to play with. You just get lost in the monitor and you really feel like it takes up your whole field of view, and it's a lot of fun. You can really see a lot of details that you miss on smaller monitors like 27 inches. Now, it's not an esports monitor by any means. If you really need that extra 240 Hertz, you're gonna have to bump down to a smaller monitor. But if you like a nice mix of visuals and just an impressive gaming like thing, I think this is really good. And on a brief side note, you may not think you need a monitor this big, and I actually do think that this is a tiny bit overkill unless you have a really deep desk, because once it gets closer, like any closer than 30 inches away, it gets pretty big. They do make a 42-inch version. I'll drop a link to that below. If I were to buy this again, I would probably get that one just so it's a little bit more flexible with more setups and I don't always have to keep it so far away. I have to have a pretty deep desk to accommodate the visual size of this thing without it becoming like too much of a head tilt thing. Then you have the 915 TKL. Here's the thing with this. This is definitely more of a luxury product. It has been out for a while, so you can buy them used or renewed for cheaper. But the thing about this is that this thing has been an extremely reliable piece of hardware for me. And I want to stand behind reliable pieces of tech gear because a lot of stuff is not. So after 2 years of using this, the things that I would personally look for is like a breakdown of the construction of it, whether it be the keys functionality or the kind of riser functions, or things like how well the wireless still connects or how long the battery lasts. And after 2 years of use, this thing is like day one. It's really impressive in terms of how well the build has stood up on this device. There's a couple cool things about it that I like a lot. One, the form factor is very good. It's actually relatively low profile except for the forehead area, but that has some media keys and volume control, which I really like for a TKL keyboard like this is. This is the clicky version. There is also a couple other versions, including a white version that only comes with the tactile version of this keyboard. They do use 2 modes, so you can actually hook this up with 2 different devices. They use Bluetooth and Logitech's Lightspeed wireless, which is what I use all the time for its extremely low latency wireless compared to Bluetooth. It's very noticeable actually. Now, the benefit of this thing is 100% its wireless capability, not necessarily its form factor or its typing experience. A custom-built mechanical keyboard for about the same price can perform better for typing experience, but when it comes to the wireless look and having that wireless feature, I do think that this is actually one of the better keyboards for that, for a TKL one. If you don't mind wires though, I highly recommend the newer Wooting HE60. That is an incredible keyboard that actually has a tangible benefit over most of the keyboards. I'll have a review out soon for that. And then continuing on the brand loyalty, I really like the Gene 305. Now, I've used a lot of their other Superlights, and while those are very good and I like those too, they don't really quite have the same cost to performance ratio that the 305 does, because this thing is only 35 bucks. and it still has the same wireless technology that the Lightspeed has. It has an extremely long battery life, but you do have to replace the battery, you can't recharge it. And it's not quite as light as some of these super light mice that are coming out even fairly cheaply right now. But I have to admit, after having this for so long and having it be basically functioning perfectly for that amount of time, I have to commend it for its longevity. It's very good. So it's got this great mixture of ergonomics, weight, cost, and effectiveness. I think it's just a very well-rounded mouse. Now in this build, our amplifier is going to be sort of the nexus that our headphones and our speakers connect to. Now my requirements for this was a well-functioning, well-rounded device that can do everything and sound really good when it does it, but it doesn't break the bank for costs. So I decided on the Topping DX3 Pro Plus. This, I truly think, is the best amplifier you can buy, all things considered, for under $200. I think this comes in at $179. This thing is a absolute unit. Not only is it compact, but it fits in Bluetooth. It fits in a 1.5 watt amplifier with really incredibly clean measurements and specifications. It also has multiple inputs, including a bunch of digital options like optical, 2 coaxials, and USB, and Bluetooth, like I said before. It also has pre-outs out the back, which is volume controlled, as well as the headphone output out the front, which is also volume controlled. And all of this is with a remote. Now this also makes our speakers and headphones very usable. So for the headphones, I picked none other than the HD6XX. There is not much that I can say about this headphone that already hasn't been said. This has been a reference point in the audiophile community for a very long time and for a very good reason. As soon as it came out, it represented this incredible value, and even though it's gone up in cost compared to what it started at, the simple fact is, at its price right now, I think it's still the best headphone. And because of that, I think if you're looking into an entry into the audiophile world, this is simply the best headphone to get started in. It has really incredible mid-range. That is its main benefit, is it will set the standard and the tone for mid-range. Even comparing against very, very high-end headphones, audiophiles still reference this in comparison to those for a good reason, is it actually sounds that good. And this is one of those products that I really, truly cannot recommend enough. I'm proud to be featuring it in this video. I think it's an excellent bang for its buck. Now, the monitors I chose to use are very small kind of mini monitors from Genelec, which is a Finnish company which makes these incredibly robust full-size studio monitors. This is the smallest and cheapest monitor they make. Now, it's still kind of expensive at $350 a piece for a $700 total. But the thing with these is that they are extremely elusive and they sound so big for what they are. They are incredibly capable for the size that they represent. Now, you're not going to be getting sub bass out of any speaker of this size. It's just not going to happen. These included, you're not going to be hitting 20 or 30 hertz. Don't even try. If you're going to want that, you're going to want to add a subwoofer. But these things sound incredibly complete, and they really fill out the mid-range and the treble just in a fascinating way for such a small speaker. Now, I consider myself like a full-range computer user. So I use it for games, I use it for movies, and I also use it for work and kind of everything in between. I'm not super dedicated to games only or super dedicated to work only. So a monitor like this is worth it to me because I get to utilize it in all those different areas, and it works well for everything. It sounds great for movies. It also sounds really good for games. It has this incredibly accurate imaging capability. But then when I need more of a reference sound for creating videos, this also works the same way. And I'm really able to fully tell what's going on in the mix with just these small 3-inch monitors. All right, and then part of this tech build is going to be sort of an on the go. I want to talk about the phone that I'm using, the laptop that I'm using, but we'll continue with the audio for just a sec. AirPod Pros 2. If you have an Apple device, this is basically the pinnacle of the wireless tech you're going to get in an earbud. The bigger Apple Maxes I do think are pretty good as well, but they are simply not as mobile as this. And I just think the advantages of being able to literally put this in your pocket and have this this great, very capable sound signature and feature set that's coming out of just a small kind of IEM package. Personally, with the introduction of the Pro 2s, I have a hard time justifying the Max for almost double the cost. It's basically got the same feature set. The sound quality is very comparable between the two, but it's like half the cost. So these are gonna be my pick. I like these things a lot. I've got a full review of this. I'll drop a link down below. If you're in the Samsung ecosystem, the Galaxy Buds Pro are the way to go over the Apple AirPods. So obviously I'm in the Apple ecosystem, and I'm using an old school iPhone X. I've thought a lot about upgrading, and every kind of generation, I think like, okay, like if this feature comes out, I'm gonna upgrade. But all these like the bathtub iPhones, they all kind of act the same now. And even though this isn't the latest and greatest for the screen technology or the camera technology, it can still take really good images if you know how to use a camera. And I just haven't found a good enough justification personally to upgrade from the X, which still has pretty good battery life. And I think personally one of the best designs that Apple has made, from the color to the material choice to the feel in your hand. It just feels a little bit more dense and solid than the newer ones do. It just feels like a better built product, actually. So that leads us into the most expensive and probably the most overkill portion of this setup, which is going to be my Apple laptop. Now, this is a 16-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro. The simple reality is that the hierarchy of what you need from an Apple laptop really depends on what you do with your Apple laptop. So if you spend most of your time, browsing the internet or working in Excel or Word docs of some kind, I'd highly recommend going with the newer and smaller and cheaper MacBooks, because this one clocks in about $2,400. It is the lowest end of this model type, but I use it for work and for video production. So it's kind of the cheapest version that I felt like I was comfortable editing a full video on. So for me, it's sort of this minimum kind of requirement, but maximum result purchase. But for a lot of people, this purchase I think would be a little bit overkill. And that's totally fair if you don't need it for anything extensive, like any sort of 3D rendering or any really extensive music mixes or video production. Anything like that, you're gonna know if you need a lot of horsepower, but I don't think most people do. So I'll leave a cheaper, better alternative for those people in the description down below. Okay, so if you're ready for a controversial one, if you like VR, I think that the Quest 2 is probably the best bang for your buck. Here's the difficult part about this, is the whole Facebook equation. So Facebook has these really frustrating privacy, lack of privacy, really. Now, I think that that's up to each person to decide on whether or not it's worth investing in something like this. But the performance of the device itself is undeniably good for its $400 asking price. And even though this is a few years old at this point, this is still one of the best VR headsets for its cost. The main benefit of this thing for me is the wireless capability. I use this a lot with the AirLink. So this can communicate with my computer wirelessly to display Steam games like Skyrim or Bone Lab straight to this without a tether and with no perceivable latency to me. That mixed with the resolution capability, the frame rate support of up to 120 Hertz, some of the visual pass-throughs so you can see what's going on in your room, and the kind of ergonomics of the whole device, as well as the accessory support, I think that this is just simply a total win for Facebook in a sea of losses, especially lately. Before you purchase, I would personally recommend looking into their history with privacy violations, but if you are looking for the best headset for the money, objectively, I think this is it. Now, to round this out, I'm going to recommend a camera. This is a Sony a6600. This is something that you can buy new, but there are a lot of versions that are either renewed for cheaper or they're on eBay. This camera, I have used the footage interchangeably with the A7S III, and having a very cheap APS-C camera that has a very similar look to a full frame camera for certain types of shots has just been a great value to me. There are a lot of benefits to this camera. One is the form factor on this thing is very, very small, but it also has the newer FC batteries that come in the A7 series, which have incredible battery life on a small camera like this. And it's also interchangeable with the bigger cameras if you have them. This camera does feature eye tracking and a touchscreen, in-body image stabilization, and a ton of custom buttons. Now, what I recommend pairing with this is the Sigma 16mm 1.4. This is a banger of a lens, incredibly wide angle, but it mixes with that 1.4 aperture to make this incredibly shallow depth of field. And I think this as a pairing, coming in at under 1,500 bucks and possibly under like 1,200 bucks if you're buying this thing used, doesn't get any better than this. The image quality is also quite frankly shocking for how good it is given the cost. This is a 4K image that was downsampled from a 6K image. I would happily use this camera as a main camera for YouTube. No problem. So that's gonna be it. I think these products offer a lot of great value for their cost, and I really could not recommend them enough. All right, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you later. Bye.